Shalom Mashpaka. May peace, serenity, and prosperity be multiplied unto you all. Kalalaba Yaba Shama Mashaki Awashaba Rakatan Taro Tawaraba Halwaya Halwaya. The bar. Welcome. As soon as you walk in, or before you walk in, before you step in, be sure you do the courtesy of wiping your feet on the rug by clicking that like button. Share this and feel free to interact in the chat if you're coming in the right spirit. So we're engaging in another lesson on spiritual warfare. Now, these are general instructions, Mashpaka. These are points to take into your own prayers when you're engaging in spiritual warfare. See, Mashiach told us to pray in secret and not to be as the hypocrites are, praying out into the open where everybody can see us. So therefore, we're not praying over the live stream to honor that commandment of Mashiach. However, you will be equipped. You will be equipped with the information on how to use the right verbiage in your prayer when you're engaging in spiritual warfare. Shalom, Josephine Israel, welcome. We're going to learn how to utilize the armor of Yah during spiritual warfare. And the armor of Yah is your primary weapons, Mashpaka. Those are your primary weapons in any form of spiritual warfare. The thing is, we've been taught wrong, or we've been given a watered down instruction on how to utilize the armor of Yah. See, what everybody views the armor of Yah as, they view it in a mindset of being on the defense. And though it is true that the armor of Yah does work in a defensive stance, it should not only be utilized for defense, but it should also be utilized offensively. Not too many people who talk about the armor of Yah knows how to use it offensively. They only teach on how to be defensive with it, on the defense. But in this lesson, we're going to learn how to use it on the offense. Oh yeah, and I won't take too much time with this neither. We'll get straight to the point on it. I want to go to none other than Akshaul's epistles, where we speak about the armor of Yah. This is Ephesians chapter 6. And we're going to start here at verse 10. And it reads, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might." So, before Akshal got into the listing of the armor of Yah, he gives instruction by the way of Yahweh. He says, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. So not only are we supposed to be on the defense, but we're also supposed to be on the offense concerning these spiritual matters. He says, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. So being strong in the Lord and in the power of his might is having authority, taking charge, having assertiveness. That's being strong and having power of might. It's also offensively. But as I said before, too many other times do we have the instructions of the armor of Yah being taught from a defensive standpoint. One reason because of that is because there's many people who speaks on the letters of Paul, and they're still unlearned. Yes, many people speak on what Paul wrote down, and they're still unlearned. They're not ready to fully digest and to teach what Paul has taught us, or what Paul wrote in these epistles. You got some Hebrews that are fully against Paul because they're so unlearned and bewitched by Hasatan that they reject these epistles because they're too hard to understand. As Peter mentioned in 2 Peter 3:15 and 16. So the only way to get a full grasp of Paul's epistles is to have a Ruach Kodash. And you also need to have a firm understanding of the Torah, of the law. Because when you have a full understanding of the law, you know where Akshaol, aka Paul, is coming from. Everything that he speaks of mirrors the law of Yah. So without that proper understanding, you're going to twist up and misconstrue what he's talking about here, which many people do. Even pastors, they twist up and misconstrue Akshaol's writings because they were taught wrong. They were taught by the institution of the Gentiles. That's why they go into seminary schools and this, that, and the third to learn and to have a accreditation by man for man's approval to know what they're talking about. This is why there's so much confusion on Akshaol's letters. And even you all in the truth, you need to be careful with the epistles. You have to get yourself completely learned and in complete synchronization with Ruach Kodash before you really start trying to teach anybody Paul's epistles, or to even try to exercise a lot of it in your own life. Because as it was said in 2 Peter 3:15 and 16, many people who are unlearned, and I'm paraphrasing, many people who are unlearned get mixed up in Akshaol's letters, as they do also the other scriptures, to their own destruction. So destruction comes with twisting up the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that was portrayed through Akshaol's epistles that the Most High used Akshaol to write. Destruction comes from that. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with Akshaol's epistles. So I digress from that. We're going to talk about using the armor of Yah on the offense in spiritual warfare. Now, as I mentioned in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, before Akshaol goes into depth of the armor of Yah, he gives simple godly instruction. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. So this is where we're coming from when we're talking about using the armor of Yah on the offense in spiritual warfare. Yeah, we know it's on the defense. We know we have a defensive advantage with it, but we're also going to learn our offensive advantage with it as well. He says in verse 11, put on the whole armor of Yah, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of Hashatan, the devil. So standing against is not only being defensive, but it's also being offensive. As he said in the previous script, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. We're going precept upon precept, line upon line here. we're really going into the meat of what Aksha'al was talking about here. So he says, standing against the wiles of Hashatan. So standing against the trickery and the deception. So that's not only being defensive, but it's also being offensive. Verse 12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So there goes the other key word in this, Mashbakar. We wrestle. We wrestle. So when you wrestle, you're also on the offense, right? You're also on the offense to get leverage over your opponent, to conquer your opponent. You're not always on the defense. If you're on the defense when you're wrestling, you're going to tire yourself out and be conquered by your opponent. That's in any form of combat, Mashbakar. Any form of combat, if you stay on the defensive, you will ultimately get conquered or overruled if you stay on the defense and you don't utilize any type of offense. And that's where the folly comes on how this has been taught on a mainstream level with people who have no idea what they're really doing with Aksha'al's epistles. They always teach from a defensive standpoint. You have to be on the offense too. And that's what spiritual warfare is about. So he says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So be strong in the power, Salak, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. And then it says, standing against the wiles of Hashatan. So from verse 10, verse 11, and verse 12, Aksha'al is telling us to be mobile in this combat, to not just stay on one side, but to both defend ourselves and take the offense against this spiritual wickedness. Again, if you just stay in the defense, you're going to eventually get overran. The longer you stay on defense, the more momentum the offense or the opponent who's on the offense can build to take you down. I mean, this is basic knowledge of combat. So moving forward in verse 13, it says, wherefore take unto you the whole armor of Yah, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And having done all to stand. Again, Aksha'al has also made an emphasis on appropriate combat here with the spiritual wickedness. Having done all to stand. So having done all is the key word here, Mashbakar. Both defensively and offensively is having done all to stand. You cannot just remain standing, just staying on the defense. You must take the offensive advantage. So then moving on to verse 14, he says, stand therefore having your loins girt about with truth. So how do we use the belt of truth in offense? That's a good question. See, the belt of truth is strictly a defensive weapon. When you're talking about engaging in combat in the spiritual realm, that is defensive all the way. You're not going to do any type of fighting with a girdle. That's to defend you. And that belt of truth is a defense against your lower nature, Mashbakar. Yeah, your lower nature. your dirty desires of your loins. Yeah, that is a spiritual defense against lasciviousness and uncleanliness. Continuing on, and having on the breastplate of righteousness. Again, this is strictly a defensive portion of the armor. So the breastplate of righteousness is protecting your being from spiritual wickedness entering your vessel. That way you're not used, Mashpaka. That way the wickedness of your heart doesn't really take over. So you got to have that breastplate of truth and the breastplate of righteousness in conjunction to defend yourself from the spiritual powers of wickedness. And from preventing yourself from being overtaken by such spiritual wickedness to where your vessel is being used and you're being used to commit wickedness. Now, verse 15, it says, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. So these are boots of peace. Now, these boots not only provide protection and stability, right, of you gaining ground in such combat with spiritual wickedness. It's also an offense as well. What can you do with boots, Mashpaka? That's right. Kick and stomp out. Kick and stomp out. So with the boots of peace, we are spiritually kicking down and stomping out demonic opposition, demonic forces. We are kicking them down and stomping them out. Relative to Luke 10 and 19, treading over serpents and scorpions. That's the in-depth description of what Messiah was talking about as far as treading over serpents and scorpions, kicking down and stomping them out. Oh, you're being violent. Well, yeah, that's why you're unlearned. If you think that's violent, that's why you're unlearned. The unlearned will say just that, oh, you're being violent. Mashiach wasn't about violence. Okay, so what do you use armor for then? For everybody thinking that and want to start making false accusations, falsely accusing me of promoting violence, what do you use armor for? Is that not for warfare? Is not armor for warfare? Is not armor for combat? So therefore, we're using the appropriate verbiage for the situation at hand. Like I told you all in a previous live stream, you cannot be gentle and courteous with the devil. So yes, the boots of peace are used to tread over serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. So when you're engaging in spiritual warfare, that's how you use the boots of peace offensively. You speak words and phrases of stomping out and kicking down demonic opposition and whatever forms of bondages, obstacles, barriers, limitations. You're kicking those things down and stomping them out. That's how you use the boots of peace, and that is an offensive weapon in the armor of Yah. These are your primary weapons that you have at all times, as long as you walking in truth. Continuing on. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. Now, that shield of faith is both an offensive and defensive component of our spiritual weaponry. See, the the less advanced in combat would just think of a shield as a defensive mechanism. But no, you can knock the hell out of something with a shield. You can cause a lot of damage with a shield. Oh yeah, yeah. But you know, you scoffers and you unlearned people hear me talking about this. Oh, you're promoting violence. Well, hey, that's why you unlearned. Yeah, you can charge up an opposition. The opposition, you can charge them up with a shield. At the same time, being defensive, gaining ground on them, and then knocking the hell out of them with that shield of faith. That's what you're doing to the demonic forces in the spiritual realm, and that's how you utilize the shield of faith in such combat, Mashpaka. You can actually use a shield as a chopping weapon too. Yeah, to break and crush. Yes, yes, yes. That's what you can use this for in spiritual warfare. This is how you use the verbiage in spiritual warfare when you're utilizing the armor of Yah. You want to charge up and knock down the opposition. You want to deflect. Yeah, you can deflect. You can smack demonic opposition upside their head with the shield of faith. This is how you pray aggressively in spiritual warfare, Mashpaka. If nobody told you, I'm telling you, spiritual warfare is warfare. That's why war is in the name of it. And your words hold power. Everything I'm saying here is how you directly defeat spiritual wickedness in the spiritual realm. It's not about being violent in the physical realm. Aksha'al already had that covered. He said we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against spiritual wickedness. So whatever offensive maneuvers and defensive maneuvers you would do in the physical realm, you must speak that out in the spiritual realm to have it done accordingly. See, I already know some unlearned people are going to miss this whole point and think I'm teaching something that's completely off subject to the scripture. But let me tell y'all something. If you're thinking like that, what did Exodus 15:3 say? Yahweh is a man of war. Is he not? Is Yahweh not a man of war? That's my question to anybody who wants to falsely accuse me of promoting violence. Because once again, Aksha'al already covered that in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. So everything that I'm portraying with the words that are coming out of my mouth, the descriptions that I'm sharing with you is what you're doing to spiritual entities of wickedness, Mashpaka. If you choose to believe I'm talking about doing this to a physical person, then that's just your own folly, and that's you allowing Hashatan to disarm you from fighting him and his forces in the spiritual realm. Because I already know, Ruach Kodash is already telling me people are taking it in that way. Because you all are unlearned. Your own unwillingness to learn these spiritual matters and to have the patience, right, which is a fruit of the spirit. See, the fruits of the spirit, we'll talk about that, just side note, but the fruits of the spirit, that's all knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, Mashpaka. That's all the fruits of the spirit are, is knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So anybody who's taking this message of how to engage in spiritual warfare tactfully is lacking those fruits of the spirit. They're lacking patience. They're lacking patience to really learn. Because everything that I'm saying right now is backed by the scriptures in these few verses from Aksha'al. I'm not adding anything to these scriptures. I'm further breaking them down for what Aksha'al was saying and all his eloquence of his speech. Continuing on. Verse 17. And take the helmet of salvation. So the helmet of salvation, that's yet again a completely defensive component in spiritual warfare. You need the helmet of salvation to protect your mind, right? Which is also in conjunction with the breastplate and the belt of truth. All that's interconnected. All that's interconnected. The belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, and the helmet of salvation. This is your shell. This is your core from being manipulated spiritually by wickedness. This is what keeps you from being used and to go in the way of reprobation. This is what keeps you from becoming a reprobate and falling out of truth. Mashpaka. Those who fallen out of truth did not fully equip themselves with the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation, and the belt of truth. Nor did they fully equip themselves with the shield of faith, above all. Those who fell out of truth did not appropriately exercise the fruits of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, goodness, faith, kindness, and self-control. So that helmet of salvation, that breastplate of righteousness, and that belt of truth are your primary defensive components from being overruled and becoming a reprobate and falling out of truth, in conjunction with the exercise of the fruits of the Spirit just mentioned. Continuing on. And the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yah. So the sword of your spirit, right? Yeah, that's both a defensive and offensive component. More so offensive. See, when we're using the sword of the Spirit as a offensive weapon, we're chopping down and cutting up spiritual wickedness. Oh, yeah. And sometimes that sword of the Spirit is used on us when we're in folly. When we get cut by the word of Yah. When we feel some type of way because the word of Yah called out some of our folly. Yeah. Yeah. The sword of the Spirit both conquers wickedness and it releases bondage. Mashpaka. It conquers wickedness by cutting and stabbing up spiritual entities of wickedness. It conquers that, and it also releases from bondage by cutting through chains and binds. The binding chains, the ropes, or whatever the entities of wickedness use to have somebody in bondage. Continuing on, verse 18. Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. So again, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit. So everything I just mentioned, as far as utilizing the armor of Yah in an offensive matter, is praying in the Spirit. Mashpaka. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. So when you're speaking this type of engagement against spiritual wickedness, you're also speaking life. Mashpaka. Again, the armor of Yah has been taught wrong on a grand scale, on a mainstream level. Everybody who has teach or who has taught it just from a defensive standpoint. They didn't teach any offense with it. And that's what I just showed you all, how to be offensive and engage in spiritual warfare with your primary weapons, the armor of Yah. So that what we read right here was Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18. This explains how to utilize the armor of Yah offensively as well as defensively. Because when Aksha'al spoke on these components, he spoke on them both defensively and offensively, which what we covered at the beginning of this live stream. I already broke that down coming from verses 10 through 12. How he introduced utilizing the armor of Yah offensively and defensively. It's key words he used that you can only pick up through Ruach Kodash. So I hope everybody who listened to this will take this instruction accordingly and utilize the armor of Yah in spiritual warfare effectively. With all that being said, may peace, serenity, and prosperity be multiplied unto you all. Shalom.